Hello, hello, hello. I am so excited. I'm Deanna Schaas. I'm the founder and owner of Intercultural Talk. And I'm so excited today to be here with Jen Gilliman and Wendy Swart-Grossman, the founders of Creative Reframe. Hello, ladies. Thank you for joining.
Hello. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I'm really excited for this conversation because, I work a lot with people who tend to be second act careers, later in their careers that are opening businesses. And sometimes people think, well, I don't really need to do that. I don't need to learn new technology. I can just coast, to the end of my career. And I feel like with the pandemic and everything going on in the world, that's really not the case anymore. And then I heard about you. Wendy and I have known each other for years, but the fact that post age 50, in the middle of pandemic, you've launched this amazing business, Creative Reframe. Really excited to hear how you're leveraging, all the experience behind you and everything really to moving forward. That was a long-winded introduction, noting that you're amazing longtime educators, longtime community activists. So how are you taking that, your years of experience and connections in the world, and leveraging it to launch your new business, Creative Reframe?
Thank you. That's great. And thank you, Deanna, so much for giving us this opportunity to have a chat about what it is that we're doing. And quite frankly, I think what we're talking so much about is relevancy. How do you stay relevant? How do you stay, so that we're actually helping to push forward the conversation? And that's what I think is where Creative Reframe is. Yes, we actually hit the LLC button back in January, but we've really been doing this work for a long time. Jen, you want to start with your background that came to this table?
And also a little bit too with when you say we're taking this conversation, give some framing to that. So for people who've never heard of you, what that means.
Sure.
Well, to begin, I've worked in higher education for 20 years. And I think that Wendy and I both agree that being educators is just an amazing opportunity to really be involved with personal transformation and working with people who, through education, have their lives changed and can go forth and bring about change in the world. And we have spent our time working for 10 years, teaching together, working with creative students, creative practitioners, and artists.
And this is at the university level.
At the university level, yes, here in Boston.
Correct. We started off at Boston University. I'm still at BU, and Jen has transferred over to Northeastern University now here in Boston.
Yeah. And so we've spent 20 years working with artists and designers and creative practitioners to design curriculum to help them think about how they can have a sustainable life in the arts, which we think that the arts matter. And what we're finding more than ever is we are in a time where there's a lot of dismantling of old systems. And I think I'm going to hand it on over to Wendy to talk about this, but we actually see that there's a need, and the need, which was originally with helping students gain entrepreneurial skills, really expanded into meeting a greater need that we see in our communities, in our businesses, and in educational institutions, where the arts actually has a central role to play in helping us reimagine new ways forward. So, Wendy.
It's actually quite fascinating because Jen comes at this from an educator background. I come at this as a political organizer and community organizer background. I'm an activist. I'm like, okay, great idea. How do we actually make this happen? How do we actually create the change in the world that we're talking about? The artists that we're working with are musicians, they're performers, they are visual artists. They're actually making real differences. We also teach in that Graduate School of Arts Administration. But what we also found too, it's a bigger and broader. There's so many creatives in everything. We actually just finished up a piece working at MIT, working at the Tufts University, their Gordon Center institution, where I'm working with a lot of computer scientists and business who see the creativity as well, but giving them the skills that they need to actually take their idea to leverage and to create even a greater impact. And we found that not only were the artists needing the business skills, but the business world needs the meaning that the artists bring to the table. And that's what we're really talking about.
And so I have a question about that when you talk about, because Jen, I thought it was interesting. You used a title for yourself in your bio talking about being an intrapreneur, like being inside a system and helping innovate. And what it sounds like you're talking about is also with entrepreneurs. So it's helping artists realize the business side, how they can actually build a sustainable business with the arts, but then use that business to drive social change and community change. Does that sound on spot?
And the way we use this is that in some ways, Wendy had, I've been working in an art school settings for more than 20 years and leading an art school as well. Yeah. But throughout that time, I initiated all sorts of programs and created summer institutes and other programs because I would see a need and I would go forth and address it. And Wendy, through her work in as a community activist, was doing the same thing in a community setting.
And as a sole practitioner, and you talk about Jen and I tease that she's a W-2, I'm a W-9. That I have a variety of clients. I'm always, looking for my next. I'm part of the gig economy.
So actually that begs the question, which is a really good transition. So how are you both finding the transition from working inside of an institution to now running a business? How does that look different in terms of both your own personal way that you structure things, but then also what you deliver?
Yeah.
Well, I want to add that we are still educators too. And I do a blended role because I'm working with art and design students at Northeastern University in their co-op program, envisioning new ways that students can work with industry. Artists and designers can segue into industry, which really dovetails with the work that we're doing with Creative Reframe. So I see that this is going hand in hand. And Wendy is also continuing to teach.
In addition, I'm a faculty member at PU, but what I'm doing now is it's actually really helped in terms of focus. Whereas before, I would work with a variety of nonprofit organizations doing everything from strategic planning to, fundraising pieces. But now I'm only much more focused about how does this actually benefit the work of and the bigger mission of Creative Reframe? How is this going to help push forward our combined work of where the arts and culture intersects with business and technology, intersects with social impact? So it's actually been able to give me much more focus. So what we're really doing now is we really are looking at innovation and entrepreneurship centers that are housed within higher education settings. So for example, we do a lot of work with the Build Lab, the Innovation Entrepreneurship Center at PU. We've worked with the Gordon Institute at Tufts. We've worked with MIT Arts for Creativity. We've worked at the iLab at Harvard. So that's really is our sweet spot.
And so when you work with those organizations, are you bringing in or helping them look at arts differently and how they can leverage arts into the business that they're doing? Or what is your client process look like?
And all.
Yeah. Let me just back up and say, when Wendy and I first started teaching together nearly a decade ago, our focus was teaching artists and arts administrators. But and we were getting, our classes were filling up, so we knew we had a need. But what was really interesting is that we were also getting people from the business school and engineering and from the humanities contacting us to get into our classes as well. And what we discovered is that through this kind of like cross-section of thinking, our students could come up with ventures that were really exciting, drawing from different skill sets. And so that got us thinking, well, where are the rich centers within universities where this cross-sector thinking can really take place? And it's these entrepreneurship and innovation centers that are popping up across the country.
And 500 now that are over in the US and abroad. And usually though they're embedded within the business school, the computers, the centers, and the engineering schools. And so we're getting ourselves in there to help help them become more welcoming to a more of a non-traditional student. For example,
so they would be your target client now. Some of these centers would be your client so that they can, which actually helps them, I guess, broaden who they're able to bring in by thinking.
What they're all about is how do you start up teams? How do you start companies? And what we all know is
interesting.
That millennials and Gen Zers are looking for meaning in the work that they're doing. And if they can, and they have this, and if we can bring in the creatives, the creative practitioners, which can be in any variety of skills, from fine arts to performance skills to communications to art historians, but it's like they can come into these centers that before they didn't feel welcomed in. and help them understand that they actually have a voice that is so needed, because they bring a whole different way, a design way of user interface to look at these different problems that the other folks need.
Do you know what's fascinating about that? That's really, really cool, because I think you, I know Wendy knows, Jen, you may know, I also do work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and studies again and again show that diverse teams are actually, they're better for the business bottom line. And of course, in that field, we're often talking about people sometimes think a little bit narrowly in terms of like ethnic, cultural, gender, all those kinds of things. But the most important thing is this idea of diversity of ideas, and how do you navigate diversity of ideas. So that's really fascinating. So you're going into organizations and helping them convene these diverse people to kind of get the biggest, broadest impact on society.
Absolutely.
Right. We see that.
Did I get it?
Yeah. We see that the arts can be a really incredible and essential vehicle for social change and for bringing about change in systems. And what we see is we're living at a time right now where we're really starting to question the systems that we've all thought were working, right? And they're not working for everyone, we're finding. And what we're saying is that artists who need economic opportunities they have chosen to pursue careers based in purpose and meaning. And I think when people are doing work that is rooted in with purpose and meaning, they are happier, they're more productive, and they are thinking about a whole, not only the individual. And we think that the arts has a role to play in creating more holistic systems, whether it's in communities where you have arts and culture at the center of a community that brings people together, whether it's in educational institutions where you have this cross-section of everybody coming together and finding ways to work together, and I think ultimately in businesses. So if we have business leaders who are valuing human creativity as something, there are people in place who can help to reimagine new ways forward. And that is what we need at this critical moment in time.
Oh, that's interesting. So some of your clients might actually be businesses where bringing in artists or people with different idea frameworks might help them solve business challenges.
Yeah, working with teams of people and also helping to reimagine how artists might fit into the equation, how they might help with the bottom line and add a social impact to what the
and really looking around the table and saying, okay, who's sitting at this table, and more importantly, who's not at the table, and how do we get them at the table? And to create, and because that's going to help in terms of a lot of HR departments in terms of are interested in obviously retention of their employees, and if they can have more of a meaningful experience at their work that we advocate for in terms of bringing meaning through the arts is a piece of that. So we're the convener, we're the bridge between these various folks who aren't talking together, so we help basically to translate languages between each other.
So I'm going to call this, because I can tell for both of you, because you're meaning driven and you like to talk about the people you serve and the things that you can do to better society. But I need to transition for you guys to talk about yourselves. So I know that's harder, but but here's what I want to hear a little bit. So what I'm hearing is, which is so exciting, you've taken these years of experience, so this lifetime of meaning. So rather than showing up at the second half of life going, oh gosh, I need to change and do something different, you're saying, I'm going to take everything that I've done, I'm going to turn it into a product that people want to buy and that will make society better. So that is phenomenal. I would like to, so based on that, I'd love to just talk a little bit more about the business side of it. So why did you feel like it was the right time to launch it as a business, as opposed to doing what you have been doing, which is inserting yourselves with either jobs or projects inside larger organizations?
Well, I think one thing I'd like to say is we saw a need and we saw the impact we were having on a smaller scale, and we felt like, why not share what we've learned with other institutions and help to facilitate meeting a need that we know that other institutions also have.
I think at a certain point you realize it's like, okay, we can keep doing what we're doing, but we're onto something. And we were asked to give a TEDx talk at BU about a little over a year ago. And I think that was really a real catalyst. where up until that point, all of our students, because the student saw us as quite interchangeably, they just called us Gendy. And it's like, you know what? I think there's something here. We need to change the, and we started thinking about creative reframe. And it's like, okay, this actually is are pieces that's needed. We need to leverage this, and why not us? Every place that we were going, people wanted to hear more and wanted us to, how can you come in? How can we, and they wanted to figure out how, so it's like, okay.
Like how they could,
what do we have that we can sell? What is it that people are willing to pay money for to have us come in? And so that's been really quite fascinating to see, what line items can we fill for people? And that really is it. And that's where, and also being able to target your audiences, because we were based in higher ed, start with what we know, which is the higher ed, which is because we have, experience in curriculums.
That makes a lot of sense, Wendy. Sorry to cut you off, but one thing, just as people are thinking of starting a business, again, it's that idea. I just think, like imposter syndrome. I know sometimes even with women, it's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And how am I going to do it? And I love the idea of, I'm going to do an inventory of everything I know. But Wendy, what you just pointed out, which is another really good inventory, is not only everything you know, but everyone that you know. Because you're right. It's so much easier to convert someone. It's so much easier to convert someone you already know into being a client than to actually go out and do something cold. So that's really a great idea as well, to realize that you're at that point.
How do you help people figure out how they can help you? And the more specific you are, it's like, oh, hi, we're looking for clients and we'll do anything. Well, that doesn't help anybody, right? It's like, we're looking for specific, we're looking at higher education, innovation, entrepreneurship centers. One of the ways that you can hire us is to do a workshop. We have a 2-hour workshop. We have a 4-hour workshop. Depending on how much money you got, we can, we can do coaching for teams as they're getting ready to pitch for different competitions. How can we, and we integrate elements of the art in terms of performance. We can help in terms of putting together, your slide and your slide decks so that they actually look good. We know that all the elements of storytelling, so we can actually be really
nice.
And then we help them to, then let's look across your college campus and who isn't in the room that needs to be. Well, how do you outreach? How do you welcome people? Things that kind of come to Jen and I naturally as conveners, as community builders, is kind of new information. We feel like we're bringing new information. This isn't new to us, but it's new to our clients. So,
which is another, again, this to me in some ways is the joy of, I like that, of having lived a number of years, is another way of saying like getting really old. But the other part that you said though, which is nice, is that sometimes we forget that what we know is something distinct. Because once you know something, you think, well, everyone must know that. But the idea that you can look at something totally different and it's a new idea for someone else. Again, it's placing value. Yes.
A value, and there's a dollar amount that's attached to that value. And that's another thing just about being at a certain age too. It's like, you know what? I am worth it. And just having, I think, being over 50, it's like, okay, there's a monetary value attached to the work that I bring to the client. That it comes to me in 5 minutes, that it would have taken somebody else, would have taken them 5 hours. Okay, we got to still pay for, and what's putting always pricing is always a tricky thing.
Oh, and of course, pricing is important. One thing you said also reminds me, I'm going to ask you this. So the reason, because age is just a number. I remember on one birthday, someone said, are you into linear age? I was like, I don't know, I guess if I don't have to be, then no. But the reason that sometimes I look at, it's not necessarily about age, but I do look at people who are non-digital natives. So, I said I used to make $1 a page typing people's papers in college. Computers were right after that. And so as non-digital natives, though, we all know, you guys know, we cannot survive unless we adapt to new technologies. And that's actually what I do a lot with my clients, is help them, because they're like you guys, they're brilliant. They've got something that, a change they need to see in the world, but they can't necessarily be found because they don't know how to use sort of the new communication technologies. And I know your website just recently launched, and that was a big deal, but how are you leveraging some of the different communication technologies to support what you're doing?
Right. Well, I have to say, there's no better way to, to learn these new technologies than to be forced to do it for your own business, right? And so I think that, and through teaching, I mean, through teaching, we have to adapt very quickly. We've had to learn how to teach online during the pandemic very quickly.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
We can take this knowledge and share it with others. And what you find is for all those people, now we hit our, we became a business 2 weeks before my 50th birthday. And I can't imagine a better way to launch my next part, the next half century.
Yeah.
To be doing work that I think matters and is meaningful, and to feel like we now have something very much that we want to share. So as far as the technology goes, and as far as to the wonderful people that work with you, Deanna, I would just say, don't be fearful, because this is also, it's a way to stay involved and connected, and people need this wisdom that people have collected over over the century.
I also like to say, I love to be able to put our money where our mouth is as well, and to be able to use our budget to help support some of our students. So, for example, we'll outsource up and coming students, former students, to help them to launch their careers, because we're also going to be teaching them. It's like, okay, great, a former student is coming on to help us do some, social media pieces. But at the same time, she's going to be, we're going to be teaching her the business. We're going to be helping her with the language. It's almost like it's a professional role, but also, they need, we need our students, and our students need us. And so it's this beautiful symbiotic relationship. So don't be, it's like, and also, where do you need to be spending your time? Sometimes it's fun to be able to, spend 5 hours digging into Hootsuite or, or Quicken Books or whatever. But sometimes it's a smarter way to outsource it to people with a virtual assistant or whatever. But ask the importance of knowing what it is that you love, and then outsourcing the pieces that you think are kind of a pain, and and finding the right people to do it with you, so you can also use it as educators. How can we use this as a
mentor? One of the things we tell our students is, we want you to make like artists, care like activists, strategize like business people, and implement like organizers. And we think that that's the model moving forward. That make and care should be a part of any business model for a successful business model of the future. But that we also, artists and creatives, also need to know how to strategize and implement. So that this is where we see these worlds coming together nicely.
It's wonderful. It sounds like you really you synthesize what you teach, though, too. Just that idea of, I think in the olden days, it was like the instructor, the teacher was, up here, and then your student was here. And the fact you're like, well, I taught them, but actually now I need them. Now I can actually make them part of my system. So that synthesizing of your ideas and really just leveling the playing field across your business is really wonderful.
Absolutely. And I tell all my students beginning this semester, right now, I'm the one, it's a conversation. Right now, I'm sharing with you information. I'm a facilitator of this conversation. And right now, I might be your teacher and giving you the grade, but as soon as the minute class is over, we are colleagues. We are,
Oh, that's nice. That's really wonderful.
And it's wonderful. One of our fabulous former students, Inesh, is the founder of the Vendada Music Festival in Vendada, Portugal. She's a concert pianist, and she started a music festival in her village. And it has been such a wonderful symbiotic relationship. I was actually over in Portugal last summer teaching workshops. When your students can hire you, that's the dream. That's the dream.
Fantastic. Right? Oh, how wonderful. All right, so we're coming up. I do want to just share, we've got just some fun. Amy says, thanks for inviting me. Helen. Yeah, Helen's just here to listen. I'm a writer, author, an aspiring playwright, and a social worker. So Helen sounds like someone who has a lot of the different things to maybe pull together to be able to build on. And Brianna, it sounds so cool. What a great mission. So just wanted to share those comments. I just have a couple other questions. And, I'm always going back to while you're sharing, because it's so fascinating, always going back to just the tactics of being business owners. And I know one thing that I find when people are building a business, but they also have other stuff that sometimes I'll help people with strategy because they're not sure, well, is this my business? Is this Creative Reframe, or is this my personal stuff? And so do you guys have do the two of you have a process for knowing when it's one or the other and when it's for the two of you together as the business?
Yeah, I'll just respond to that quickly. Is there an echo? I can't tell. Anyway, I have been teaching in the prisons over the years for about 7 years, and that's something that I'm really passionate about. And Wendy and I had to make a decision about whether or not that was going to become part of something that we do with Creative Reframe, and we came to the decision that that was my thing. That was something that I love to do, and tangentially it might connect with Creative Reframe, but we're not going to do that. We're going to really focus our attention on where we can have some paying clients that are in need of the services we provide. No.
Yes, and Wendy, did you see anything like that? I'm going to put earphones in just in case we are echoing. I think they said something if I use.
For me, a lot of my work, it's been interesting, Deanna. It's some of my clients, my existing clients from my sole proprietorship have moved over into Creative Reframe, and some of them actually are. It's kind of a non sequitur, and I've actually really, it's really helped me to say no to some potential work, because that's what I used to be, but it's not filling me up anymore. And so I will, I kind of use Creative Reframe in some ways as an excuse to say thank you very much, but I've pivoted in a different direction. So I'm really trying to think more about, but I also have my side projects are more about creative writing that I actually do very separately. Because I wrote a book, and that has absolutely nothing to do with Creative Reframe. But sometimes it does feel a little bit because it shows me as a creative, but it really isn't. So
wait, and just so I could throw in, all Wendy had to do to write a book was spend a year in an RV with two like preteen teens and her husband going to like every national forest,
national park and public library.
So, I'll put some of those links in the comments when we're done. I'll put the links in for your website, for your TED Talk, Wendy, for your book. But one thing, I guess, the takeaway from that, tying back to the question of how do you decide, is it does sound like it's a very conscientious process.
Oh, yeah.
You can't just kind of let it go. You got to do it. And sometimes with clients, we'll put together gauge questions. Is there, so gauge question like, is it, I think of one person who's doing a woman, actually, I'll throw it out there. Her name is Tony Rupert, and she and her sister are launching this amazing arts project. It's called Mental Wellness Hope for Sisters. Tony's also an amazing artist. And so they had to decide, well, is this a Tony art project, or is this a project we're doing together? And what they actually did is it allowed, in some cases, for Tony to be able to bring her sister in on a project, or to know if there's not a sister component, then we know that's not it. Or if it's an art commission, then that's not it. But we set up gauge questions to make it really easy for them to navigate that. So it does have to be conscientious.
Right.
So I think at this point, everybody who is listening and those who will watch on the recording know that you are just amazing. So really doing amazing work. Is there anything that I haven't asked you? I know we had a couple conversations leading into this. Is there anything that you wanted to share, maybe that we haven't touched on yet, about either your business and what you do, or about being business owners, being entrepreneurs?
I would just like to encourage people to pay attention. The whole idea of attention brings intention, and paying attention to what it is that brings you joy and helps make the world a better place. Ideally, there's a combination there, and then don't be discouraged. And that if not now, when? And go ahead and to launch those dreams, because you don't know unless you try. And don't be afraid of being older and starting something, because that's going to be a cool story. And really, it's who's got the cool stories at the end of the day. That's the real winner.
Well, and honestly, if you don't start today, it's going to be another year from now, and you'll still just not have started. Like, you know what I mean? Like, any day is the day to start. So I'm sorry, Jen, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, to piggyback on that, do something creative every day, just as a way of being and a way of moving through this world. Because when we start to value that within ourselves, I think that it really can transform how we relate to the world around us and to the people around us.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for doing this. It was so much fun to hear more about what you're doing. It's so important. I mean, it's really, this diversity of ideas is one of the most, I mean, we're seeing it right now everywhere, where people are needing tools to be able to bring everyone to the table and to be able to communicate in a way to realize that you can leverage everyone's ideas to make something better. You know, it's like where 1 and 1 is 10. So thank you for the work you're doing to do that and bringing those resources to education centers and businesses and communities where you work. I'll keep you posted. If anyone has questions, leave them in the comments. I'll leave all the links there as well. And I hope we can get together again soon. It was really fun to talk to you so much.
Me too. Thank you, Deanna, for your generosity.
It was my pleasure. Okay. Bye-bye. Oh, one more terrific panel. Thank you. We got, thanks for Alberta. Terrific panel. You guys are truly an inspiration. Thank you. So actually, that's the perfect closing line, right? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.